The first time I saw her waddling across the cul-de-sac in her oversized sun hat and clipboard, I just knew Brenda Halverston was going to be a problem. "I'm going to need to speak with you about that ATV," she said, squinting at me like I'd just run over her begonias. "It's a noise violation. Not to mention, it's not allowed on the trail." I took a long sip of my coffee and leaned against the garage. "Brenda, it's not even 8 a.m. It's my day off. Can we not do this today?" Brenda's lips puckered like she'd bitten into a lemon. "The HOA doesn't take days off, Mr. Lawley," she said, tapping her clipboard. "And Article 7, Section 12 clearly states that motorized vehicles are prohibited on community trails." I wasn't born yesterday. I'd read the HOA bylaws front to back when I bought the house. The only trail in question was a gravel path that ran behind my backyard, leading to the lake. It was technically unowned land county property. Brenda and the HOA had been trying to claim it for years just to slap on more restrictions, but they hadn't succeeded. "I'm not on HOA property," I said, pointing toward the trail. "That's public. I checked with the county, twice." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "It's disruptive. Residents have complained." No one complained. My neighbors either waved when I passed or asked if they could take the ATV for a spin. Brenda just didn't like that I had something she couldn't control. "I'll be filing a formal violation," she said, turning on her heel. "Good luck with that," I called after her. 2 days later, I got the letter. Violation notice. Unauthorized use of motor vehicle on common area. Attached was a fine for $300 and a threat of further action if I didn't comply. I laughed out loud. I walked over to my neighbor Joe's house. Joe was a retired land surveyor and had every map of this place dating back 50 years. "You're not going to believe this," I said, handing him the letter. Joe glanced at it and chuckled. "She finally went through with it, huh?" "I need the county line maps," I said. "I want to make sure I'm right." Joe disappeared into his garage and came back with a rolled-up topographic map. "Here, the trail's not part of the HOA. It's owned by a private trust that's been dormant for years." That got me thinking. I did some digging, dug deeper, and then I hit gold. The trust that owned the trail had dissolved 2 years ago. The land was up for private acquisition, quietly listed in a county land auction that no one had paid attention to. No one, except me. A month and a half later, Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting. I showed up, ATV keys in hand, county deed in the other. Brenda stood at the front of the clubhouse, fuming. "Mr. Lawley has been in repeated violation of community vehicle regulations. We're here to vote on escalating enforcement, potentially legal action." I raised my hand. Brenda didn't call on me, but I stood anyway. "Before you all get too excited about lawsuits, I'd like to share something." I dropped a stack of documents on the table. "As of last week, I'm the private owner of the entire trail, the one that runs from the back of my yard all the way to the lake. The same one Brenda claimed was HOA property." The room went dead silent. Brenda's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like she might faint. "Any attempt to fine me for using my own land," I said, smiling wide, "will be reported as harassment." "I've already spoken with a lawyer." Joe, sitting in the back, let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." Brenda sat down, her face pale. I walked out of that meeting with a grin on my face and my ATV waiting for me just outside. The morning after the HOA meeting, I found a laminated flyer zip tied to my mailbox post. "Community Safety Alert," it read in bold red letters. Below that, a list of vague accusations: trespassing, reckless driving, endangerment. No names, but it didn't take a genius to know who it was aimed at. I tapped the flyer against my palm and looked around. Half the houses on the street had the same paper flapping in the breeze. Brenda wasn't giving up, she was escalating. Joe wandered over from across the street, brushing sawdust off his flannel sleeves. "I take it the Queen's making her next chess move. She's printing libel now," I said, holding up the flyer. "Wonder what her plan is when this one backfires." Joe scratched his chin. "If she keeps pushing, she's gonna spill into criminal territory. You might want to start documenting everything." I already installed a few cameras last week, I said. One points down the trail entrance, another at the side gate. If she steps 1 inch onto my property, I'll have it on record. Joe nodded. Smart. You might also want to check with the county clerk again. She's got friends over there she could be trying to contest the deed. That hadn't occurred to me. I headed straight to the records office after lunch. The clerk, a guy named Evan who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, pulled up the documents on his monitor and confirmed nothing had changed. Still registered to you, he said, turning the screen so I could see the digital seal. No pending challenges. Mind flagging the file? I asked. There's a homeowner association sniffing around. I wouldn't put it past them to try something shady. Evan gave a slow nod. I'll make a note. If anyone tries to alter or contest it, we'll notify you immediately. I left the office feeling better, but not by much. Brenda wasn't the type to quit when the rules got in her way. She just found new ones to twist. 2 days later, I got a call from my insurance provider. Mr. Lawley, we received a report of multiple safety violations on your property, the woman on the phone said. Allegations of unregistered vehicles and dangerous terrain. We're required to initiate an inspection. I nearly dropped the phone. Who filed the report? I can't say, she replied, but it was submitted through the anonymous tip portal. Of course. By the end of the week, an inspector in khakis and reflective gear showed up with a clipboard of his own. I gave him the tour, explained the situation, and showed him the county deed. He took pictures, asked a few questions, and left without much commentary. A few hours later, I got the email. No violations found, case closed. But the hits kept coming. The next morning, I noticed a new sign posted at the trail access point behind Brenda's yard. Private HOA property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. It was staked right into the ground on the very trail I now owned. I took a photo of it and called the sheriff's non-emergency line. Deputy Richter arrived just after noon. He was built like a linebacker and had a calm, no-nonsense demeanor. I explained the situation, showed him the deed, then walked him out to the sign. Well, that's a problem, he said, kneeling to inspect the ground. She pounded this in less than 24 hours ago, still fresh. Can I remove it? Absolutely. It's your land. He pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos of the sign, then took one of the property marker nearby. I'll file an incident report, he said. Technically, this qualifies as a legal posting on private property. If she does it again, we can issue a citation. By the time the sign was in my trash bin, Brenda was already in her backyard, glaring like I'd stolen her dog. She didn't say a word, just stood there, arms crossed, daring me to acknowledge her. I didn't, but that afternoon I went even further. I called up a friend of mine named Lel. He ran a local landscaping business and owed me a favor from back when I helped him settle a permit dispute. You still do gravel work? Sure do. What do you need? Trail upgrade. Real basic, flatten it out, reinforce the edges, maybe drop some wood chip borders around the bend to the lake. He whistled. That's a couple days' work. You want it nice or HOA proof? Make it so good even Brenda can't lie about it being unsafe, he laughed. Now that's a challenge. 3 days later, Lyle and his crew rolled in with their compactors and dump trailer. They worked fast. By the end of the first day, the trail looked better than any sidewalk in the subdivision. Wide, level, and clean. That's when things got ugly. Late that night, my phone buzzed with a notification from one of the security cameras. Motion detected. I opened the feed and saw a hunched figure creeping along the trail with a flashlight. They paused at the bend, then disappeared behind a tree. I hit record and watched. 2 minutes later, sparks flew. Someone was trying to sabotage the compacted gravel, dig it out, or maybe plant something in it. I couldn't tell. I called the sheriff before I even got my shoes on. Deputy Richter was back in under 20 minutes. This time, he brought a second officer and a portable floodlight. Together, we followed the trail and found the damage. Someone had tried to pry up sections of the border and scatter nails across the path. The deputy crouched near the pile of nails. That's not just vandalism, he said. This could cause serious injury. Liability shifts if someone gets hurt. That's criminal mischief. They took the footage, bagged the nails as evidence, and left with promises to escalate the report. The next morning, I got a call from the sheriff's office. "We matched the figure in the video to a prior complaint," the dispatcher said. "She's been warned before about trespassing on private parcels. We're sending an officer to her house this afternoon." Brenda got a visit, all right. Half the neighborhood watched as a patrol car parked in her driveway. The deputy was with her less than 10 minutes, but the fallout was instant. Word spread fast, and residents started talking quietly at first, but with growing confidence. I started receiving messages through the community app. Not threats this time, questions. "Is it true she's been forging signs? Did she really try to damage your property? I thought that trail was public, but you actually bought it." I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't need to. The story was telling itself now. The following week, a petition circulated among the residents. Not for my removal, but for hers. The HOA president, Brenda's longtime ally, resigned quietly. Said he was stepping back for health reasons, but everyone knew the truth. With him gone, a special election was scheduled. I didn't run, didn't need to. My neighbor Maya did sharp, level-headed, former paralegal. The opposite of Brenda in every way, she won by a landslide. Brenda didn't show up to the next meeting, or the one after that. Her clipboard disappeared. Her flyers stopped, and the path to the lake. It's still there, wider, smoother, and more peaceful than ever, sometimes. On weekend mornings, I fire up the ATV and cruise down to the water with a coffee in hand. The sun catches the gravel just right, and the old trail looks like something out of a magazine. I park by the edge, cut the engine, and listen to the birds. No more flyers. No more threats. Just a quiet trail and a neighborhood that finally remembered who it belonged to. Rain swept in the following week, a cold, drizzling mist that made the whole neighborhood look like it had been dunked in dishwater. I didn't mind. Gave me time to start organizing all the documents I'd gathered over the last few months into a proper binder, just in case Brenda tried to claw her way back into relevance. I was flipping through a section of county maintenance records when I noticed something odd. One of the parcels adjacent to the trail, just a narrow sliver of land between Brenda's backyard fence and the start of the gravel path, was still listed as under HOA easement. Not ownership, easement. That meant the HOA had the right to access it but didn't own it. The problem was, that specific section had a brand new wrought iron gate installed across it, with a HOA maintenance access only sign hung in the center. I'd seen it just the other day while driving past. The gate was chained shut and padlocked. That didn't sit right with me. I drove down to the county zoning office and asked to pull the most recent permit filed for that parcel. The clerk, a wiry guy with a buzz cut and a coffee addiction, spent a few minutes typing. "No permits for a structure or gate in the last year," he said. "Are you sure?" "The HOA just installed a gate there," he shook his head. "If they did, they didn't file it through us. That's an unapproved obstruction on a public easement. It's illegal unless the landowner authorized it." "Who owns that strip?" "County does. It's designated as utility overflow. No one's allowed to restrict access." I thanked him, grabbed a printed copy of the records, and made a beeline for the new HOA board office. Maya had converted the old clubhouse storage room into a workspace, complete with a corkboard and stacks of reorganized files. She looked up when I walked in, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "You're gonna want to see this," I said, dropping the printout in front of her. She read it silently. "They locked a county easement," she asked, "without a permit. And they're using it to block access to part of the trail." Her eyes narrowed. "How recent is this?" "They installed that gate in the last 4 days, right after the sheriff visited Brenda." Maya stood, grabbed her tablet, and pulled up the HOA's official maintenance ledger. "There's a charge listed here. Security Access Control Installation Phase 1, $5,000. No vendor name, no invoice ID." I blinked. "They used HOA funds for that, looks like it, without board approval." Maya's fingers flew across the screen. That's embezzlement. Misuse of community funds, unauthorized construction, and obstruction of public land. That's not just shady, that's criminal. I leaned over the desk. You think Brenda did it? She was on the finance committee until last month. She still had access for a few days after the election. But someone else had to sign off too. She couldn't authorize a payment that large alone. Maya's jaw tensed. I need to call a vote to audit the last 6 months of transactions. If we find more of these, we bring it to the district attorney. She scheduled the emergency board meeting for the next evening. In the meantime, I returned to the trail with bolt cutters and a copy of the county easement map. I waited until dusk when traffic was light and cut the padlock clean off. The gate creaked open like it had already given up. From across the yard, a porch light flicked on. Brenda stepped out in a raincoat, arms folded tightly. "You're trespassing on HOA property," she called out. "Nope," I said, holding up the map. "County easement. Your gate was illegal. I've got the permit records and photos. You're damaging community assets. I'm restoring public access you tried to steal." She didn't respond, just stood there, rain dripping from the edge of her hood. I left the gate wide open and walked away. The emergency board meeting was packed, not just with board members, but with residents, many of whom hadn't shown up to a meeting in years. Word had spread fast about the gate and the funds. Maya stood at the front, flanked by 2 other board members and a man in a charcoal suit with a briefcase. She tapped the microphone. "We've investigated several irregularities in the HOA's financial records over the past 6 months, she began. Specifically, unauthorized expenditures, falsified maintenance entries, and the misuse of HOA funds for private infrastructure. Gasps rippled through the room. Maya continued. "This is Mr. Keating. He's a forensic accountant contracted through a local law firm. He's reviewed the documents and has a summary to share." Keating stepped up and opened his briefcase. "Our review indicates over $30,000 in unauthorized spending. At least 5 transactions were marked with forged board approval signatures. All funds were diverted to a bank account linked to a now-dissolved LLC under the name Halverston Property Services." Brenda's face drained of color. She was sitting in the back row, flanked by 2 of her former allies. Neither looked at her. Keating closed the briefcase. "We've already submitted our preliminary report to the county prosecutor's office. A formal complaint will be filed by the end of the week." Maya stepped forward again. "In accordance with Article 9 of the HOA Charter, we're moving to initiate a full audit and suspend any board members or committee members named in the report." The vote was unanimous. Brenda stood abruptly, knocking her chair over. "This is a political stunt," she shouted. "You're all being manipulated. That trail was never meant for personal use, it was a liability. I was protecting this community." Maya didn't flinch. "You used HOA money to install a gate on land you didn't own. You forged board documents. You tried to control access to a trail you had no legal claim to. That's not protection. That's fraud." Brenda stormed out, no applause, no support, just the low murmur of residents finally seeing the truth. 2 weeks later, the county filed formal charges. Fraud, falsification of records, obstruction of public access. The sheriff's department escorted her out of her home just before dawn on a Tuesday. She didn't resist. She didn't even look up. The trail remained open, the gate removed entirely by county order. Maya pushed through new bylaws restricting financial control to a 3-person committee with mandatory quarterly audits. Transparency became the new norm. And as for me, I kept the trail in immaculate shape, even added a solar-powered lamp near the lake bend. On clear nights, you could see the reflection ripple across the surface like a mirror. Every month, a few more neighbors started using it, walking their dogs, jogging, or just strolling down to the shore with a book. The trail had become more than a shortcut. It was a symbol now of how one person's greed had been undone by truth, persistence, and a community finally stepping up. One Saturday morning, Maya stopped by as I was raking fresh gravel near the entrance. "You thinking of running for the board next season?" she asked, brushing back her sleeves. I laughed. "I think I've done my part," she nodded. "Fair enough, but if you ever change your mind, I've got a spot for someone who knows what a property line actually means." She left with a wink. I looked down the trail, the morning sun cutting long shadows through the trees. The path was quiet again. No more signs, no more threats. Just the sound of wind and the slight crunch of gravel beneath my boots. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood felt like it belonged to the people living in it, not the ones trying to control it. 2 months passed, and the trail had never seen so much foot traffic. Kids rode their bikes along the smooth gravel. Retirees walked their dogs at sunrise, and families brought folding chairs to the lake bend for evening picnics. Whatever bitterness Brenda had tried to seed had withered away under the weight of community use. It felt like everyone had exhaled at once, like a long-standing tension had finally broken. I was finishing a small wooden bench near the water one afternoon, drill in hand, sawdust collecting on my jeans when I heard a slow clap behind me. "Never thought I'd see you doing carpentry," said a voice I hadn't heard in years. I turned around and saw Greg Vance, former city planner. Used to live 3 streets over but moved after a zoning dispute with the HOA back when Brenda's grip was ironclad. "Heard what you did," he said, stepping up beside me. "Didn't believe it at first, buying the trail. That's one for the books. They gave me all the motivation I needed," he gestured toward the gravel. "This place looks better than anything the city's managed. Ever think about doing this full time?" I laughed. "I prefer my weekends quiet." Greg didn't smile. He pulled a folded manila envelope from under his arm. "There's something you should see," he said, handing it over. "I was working a private zoning job last month. The HOA filed an application with the county right before the new board took over. They were trying to reclassify the trail quietly. Claim it was abandoned land, then mark it for future development." I frowned. "When?" The request was submitted 4 days before the election. Brenda's signatures on it along with someone named Lance Doran. I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of the reclassification request with a county timestamp and handwritten annotations. And Greg wasn't exaggerating. It was blatant. The document claimed the trail had no current or historical use and posed an environmental hazard due to erosion and unmanaged traffic. By the time I got back to my house, I'd already made 3 phone calls, one to Maya, one to the county clerk, and one to the Environmental Compliance Office. The next morning, I met Maya outside the HOA's temporary office. She looked exhausted. "I pulled the HOA's digital archives," she said. "That reclassification request was never discussed in any board meeting. Brenda and Lance filed it through a private attorney. They used HOA letterhead and forged support statements from residents who moved out years ago." I handed her the envelope. "Greg said the county flagged it but hadn't processed the zoning change yet. They're holding off now that they know it was fraudulent." Maya tucked the papers under her arm. "We need to notify the county attorney. This goes beyond misuse of funds. They tried to rezone land they didn't own using fake documents." That afternoon, we sat in a dim, wood-paneled conference room at the county administration building. Across from us sat Deputy District Attorney Leslie Kim. She wore a charcoal blazer and carried a legal pad filled with precise, slanted handwriting. Maya laid out the evidence. The zoning request, the forged community endorsements, the timeline. Leslie didn't interrupt once. When we were done, she tapped her pen on the pad. "This isn't just zoning fraud," she said. "If they used HOA funds to pay for the legal filing, that's wire fraud. If they forged public documents, that's a felony. If they tried to change land classification to devalue surrounding properties, that's conspiracy to commit real estate fraud." She stood, collected the papers, and looked at us both. "We'll be opening an investigation today." 3 weeks later, Brenda was arrested again, this time at a strip mall outside town. She was indicted on 6 counts: falsifying legal documents, conspiracy to defraud a government agency, and criminal misuse of public funds among them. Lance Doran, the other signature on the zoning application, was picked up the following morning at his lake house 2 counties over. The courtroom was packed during the preliminary hearing. I sat in the back, arms crossed, while Brenda's attorney tried to paint her as a misguided but well-meaning volunteer. The judge wasn't buying it. These were deliberate, coordinated efforts, he said, his voice echoing across the chamber. Not clerical errors, not misunderstandings. These actions endangered public trust and undermined the legal framework of municipal zoning. Bail was denied. Back in the neighborhood, Maya called a community meeting not out of urgency, but transparency. She stood under the shaded pavilion by the park with over 60 residents gathered around. "We'll be holding a full HOA election in 60 days, she said. "New bylaws are in place. Financial oversight is now a 3-person panel. No one will hold unchecked authority again." There was no applause, just nods. It wasn't about celebration, it was about closure. After the crowd dispersed, Joe walked up beside me, sipping from a thermos. "You think we've seen the last of that circus?" he asked. "I think we finally shut the tent for good." He nodded toward the trail. Funny how a path that simple turned into the hill they chose to die on. I looked out at the gravel, the curve of the woodchip border, the bench I'd just finished by the lake. "They thought the trail was just dirt," I said. They never realized it was the route back to the community they lost. By the time summer rolled in, the neighborhood felt like a different place. Kids chalked hopscotch lines on the sidewalks. Neighbors waved again. The trail had become something of a landmark. 2 local artists painted a mural at the trailhead, one side showing tangled, thorny vines, the other a sunrise over open gravel. Maya added a small plaque under it. "Community is not something you control, it's something you earn." I didn't ask for credit, didn't want it. I just kept maintaining the trail, quietly replacing loose stones, trimming overgrowth, and making sure the path stayed open, clear, and level for anyone who wanted to walk it. And when strangers passed by and asked who owned it, I'd just smile and say, "It belongs to everyone now." That's how it was always supposed to be.